He pranked a royal guard with hot sauce. Here's what happened. Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you're here. In today's video, we have a story that will captivate your imagination and keep you on the edge of your seat. But before we dive in, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, whether it's across the world or just around the corner. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss out on tomorrow's special story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get started. Jack Peterson, a 28-year-old social media influencer from Chicago, had always been driven by a deep desire to entertain. His life was all about pushing boundaries, trying new things, and above all, making people laugh. For the past few years, he had traveled across the country, pulling pranks and sharing his videos with his ever-growing followers. His social media accounts were flooded with thousands of comments, cheers, and encouragements. People loved the thrill of his wild, reckless stunts, and Jack thrived on that attention. But despite his rising popularity, Jack knew deep down that his success relied on one crucial factor: going viral. He wasn't just making content for fun. He was making content to be seen, to gain followers, and to grow his brand. To him, viral videos meant fame, and fame meant everything. However, Jack also knew that going viral wasn't easy. It wasn't enough to just post a funny video or a clever prank anymore. He needed something big, something shocking, something no one had seen before, something that would break the internet. And that's when it hit him. Jack had just landed in Washington, D.C. for the first time. As he strolled through the streets, his eyes caught the iconic sight of the White House guards. Those stoic men in their red coats and tall black hats standing perfectly still, unmoving, no matter what happened around them. It was as if they were a living challenge. Tourists, in their hundreds, tried to get them to react, to laugh, or even to blink. But the guards remained stoic, unfazed by the most outrageous attempts. For Jack, it was the perfect test. No one had succeeded in making these guards break their composure. But Jack knew he could be the one to do it. He walked past the palace with a grin, his mind racing. This was going to be his next big stunt, a prank that would send shockwaves across the internet. And so, as the tourists snapped their photos, Jack began to form a plan. What if he could make the unmovable guards react, he thought, and in that moment, he knew this was it. This was the moment that could define his viral success. As Jack continued walking through the streets of Washington, D.C., his mind was buzzing with the excitement of his new idea. He had always been the type to take risks, but this time he was determined to make it bigger than anything he had done before. He could feel the anticipation building inside him as he approached the White House guards. These men, who were known for their unshakable discipline, were more than just part of the scenery. They were a challenge. And Jack, ever the risk-taker, was itching to break that discipline. He had seen tourists try everything to get a reaction from the guards, making silly faces, performing impromptu dances, even shouting at them. Yet, no matter what was thrown their way, the guards remained stoic, unmoving, as if nothing could pierce their focus. To Jack, this was the ultimate test of his ability to entertain and shock his audience. It wasn't just about creating another funny moment. It was about proving that he could break the unbreakable. He wanted to show his followers that he was daring enough to take on the challenge no one else had succeeded at. And that's when the idea struck him. His eyes landed on a nearby food stall, and Jack's mind raced. He bought a snack, but it wasn't the food that caught his attention. It was the small bottle of hot sauce that came with it, bright red and notorious for its fiery heat. He had heard stories about how just a single drop could make someone's eyes water, and Jack couldn't help but smile at the thought. If there was anything that could break the guard's focus, surely it would be something as shocking as this. He stood for a moment, imagining the scene in his mind, the crowd laughing, his followers going wild online as the guard finally cracked. Jack knew that the viral video potential here was off the charts. All he had to do was get close enough, splash the hot sauce on the guard's face, and boom, the reaction would be priceless. The internet would be buzzing, and Jack's name would be trending everywhere. With his phone in one hand and the hot sauce in the other, Jack walked confidently toward one of the guards. He turned on his camera, speaking loudly for his followers to hear. "All right, guys," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "We're about to test just how strong these guards really are. Let's see if they can handle a little bit of spice without thinking twice." As he took the first step toward his target, Jack felt the thrill of the stunt surging through him. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. He could already hear the applause in his mind, the viral fame he was about to achieve. But little did he know, things were about to take an unexpected turn. As Jack approached the guard, a rush of excitement coursed through him. He held the small bottle of hot sauce tightly, knowing that this was the moment that could make or break his career. He had envisioned this prank going off without a hitch. He would splash the sauce, the guard would react, and the crowd would erupt into laughter. The video would go viral, and Jack's fame would skyrocket. His heart raced in anticipation. But as he got closer to the guard, something inside him shifted. He was so focused on his goal, so driven by the desire to succeed, that he hadn't truly stopped to think about the consequences of his actions. Jack raised the bottle, his eyes fixed on the guard's stoic face. He squeezed, and the hot sauce flew through the air, landing directly on the guard's face. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The crowd gasped. Jack stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding, waiting for the guard to flinch, wipe his face, or, better yet, chase after him. He expected something, anything. But the guard didn't move, he didn't blink, he didn't say a word. He stood still, unmoved, as if nothing had happened. Jack's confidence wavered, and a knot began to form in his stomach. The sauce dripped down the guard's cheek, but his expression remained completely neutral. There was no sign of irritation, no breaking of focus. It was as though the guard was completely unaffected, like a statue, completely impervious to the prank that Jack had meticulously planned. For the first time, Jack felt a chill of doubt. This wasn't what he had expected at all. The people around him weren't laughing, they weren't cheering him on. Instead, a heavy silence hung in the air. Some people were shaking their heads, others were muttering to each other. And worse, some were already pulling out their phones, not to record the prank for Jack's followers, but to capture the moment for their own social media feeds. Jack's heart sank. The situation was turning quickly from an entertaining stunt to something uncomfortable. The laughs he had imagined were now replaced with whispers of disapproval. Jack began to feel the weight of his actions pressing down on him. His initial excitement gave way to an uneasy awareness of how out of place his prank had become. As he stood there, frozen, his mind raced. Was this really funny? What had he hoped to achieve by making a royal guard, the very symbol of discipline and respect, an object of ridicule? For the first time, Jack realized that he hadn't thought this through. He hadn't considered how the crowd might react, or how his followers would see it. Instead of the laughter he'd expected, he found himself standing in a sea of judgment, and now there was no going back. The moment of silence stretched on, and Jack stood there, gripping his phone with shaking hands, unsure of what to do next. The crowd had shifted from amused curiosity to uncomfortable disapproval. His mind raced, desperately searching for a way to turn the situation around, to somehow make it funny again. But there was no escaping the uncomfortable truth. His prank had backfired. What had started as a harmless stunt to go viral now felt like a public mistake, a miscalculation that could cost him everything. The lack of reaction from the guard had thrown Jack off. He had expected at least some response, whether it was a glare, a sigh, or a raised eyebrow. But the guard, unaffected by the hot sauce dripping down his face, remained completely still. It was as if Jack hadn't even existed, and the longer Jack stood there, the more he realized that this was no longer a joke. The people around him weren't laughing, they weren't even cheering. Instead, their expressions had shifted to concern, disappointment, and, worse, judgment. Jack's breath quickened as he realized that his followers, The people who had supported his every wild idea would soon see this. What would they think? Would they find it funny? Or would they see him as the fool, the one who crossed a line that should have never been crossed? His stomach churned with the thought. The fear of losing everything he had worked for, the fame, the followers, the brand deals, began to settle in. He couldn't afford to make a mistake like this. Not when his entire career had been built on the desire to entertain, to create moments of joy and laughter for people. As Jack stood frozen, a woman in the crowd spoke up, breaking the silence. "That was too much," she muttered under her breath. Jack's heart sank further. The realization that he had not just disappointed a few people but made them uncomfortable hit him like a ton of bricks. The voices of disapproval were growing louder now. Some people even started shaking their heads, some pulling out their phones, no longer in support, but to document his failure. The very thing he had worked so hard to build was slipping away from him in front of his eyes. Before Jack could process everything, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed behind him. His blood ran cold. He turned slightly, only to see a group of security officers heading his way, their eyes locked on him with unrelenting focus. His worst fear had come to life. What was once a playful prank now felt like something much more serious. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the officers closed in, their stern expressions leaving no room for explanation. His mind raced. How had it all escalated so quickly? What had started as a viral stunt was now a public spectacle, and there was no easy way out. As the security officers approached, Jack's heart pounded in his chest, each step they took toward him feeling heavier than the last. He could hear the whispers of the crowd growing louder, their disapproval now a tangible presence in the air. What had once been a playful stunt for his followers was now unfolding into something far more serious. Jack had always prided himself on his ability to entertain, to keep things light and fun, but in this moment, the gravity of what he had done hit him like a freight train. He had crossed a line, one that he hadn't even realized existed until it was too late. The officers didn't look angry, but there was no mistaking the authority in their eyes. Jack tried to keep his composure, forced a nervous smile, and even tried to make light of the situation. "Hey guys, is there a problem?" he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of the unfolding reality. But the officers didn't smile back. They simply moved toward him, one of them extending a hand to guide him away. "Sir, we need to speak with you," one of them said firmly. It wasn't a request. It was an order, and the reality of it sent a chill down Jack's spine. The words from the officer felt like a punch to the gut. Assault. The word echoed in Jack's mind, sending shockwaves through his entire body. He hadn't intended for this to happen. In his mind, it had been just a joke, a harmless prank designed to get a reaction. But now, in the cold light of reality, he saw that his actions had consequences far greater than a viral video or a few lost followers. He had assaulted a royal guard. His stomach churned as he was led away, his hands clammy, his thoughts racing. The crowd, once buzzing with excitement over Jack's latest stunt, now stood silently, recording his every move. His followers, who had once cheered him on for his audacity, were now silent or turning away in disappointment. Jack's phone, still in his pocket, buzzed with incoming notifications, but they weren't the cheers he had hoped for. They were the comments of those who had once supported him, now calling him out for being disrespectful and immature. It was like watching his own reputation unravel in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As Jack was escorted away, the weight of the situation sunk in deeper. This was no longer a prank gone wrong. It was a public spectacle that had cost him everything. His followers had begun to turn on him. His sponsors had already dropped him. And now, facing the possibility of legal action, Jack realized that the fame he had so desperately sought had come at a price he couldn't afford. The rush of going viral no longer seemed worth it. As Jack was escorted away from the scene, the weight of what had just happened began to settle in. The officers, firm and unyielding, guided him through the throngs of curious onlookers, their stern expressions offering no comfort. Jack's mind raced, trying to process how everything had spiraled so quickly. He had been so focused on creating a viral moment, so fixated on the idea of going viral for the right reasons, that he hadn't stopped to consider the real-world consequences of his actions. Now, as he walked past the crowd, their disapproving glances burned into his skin, and his confidence, once unshakable, was shattered. What had started as a playful prank had now turned into a nightmare. He thought he was just testing the limits, just pushing the boundaries of what could entertain his followers. But now, he was being accused of assault, a charge he could hardly wrap his mind around. In his head, it was all just a joke, but in the eyes of the law and the people around him, it was something much more serious. His followers, those who had once supported him and laughed along with his antics, were now silent. Worse, they were beginning to turn on him. The comment section of his social media feed, which used to be filled with praise, was now flooded with backlash. People called him disrespectful, immature, and worse. Jack's stomach twisted as the reality of his situation deepened. He had always believed that his content was just for fun, that as long as it entertained, nothing else mattered. But now, standing there, being led away by security, he saw how wrong he had been. His mind flashed to his family, to his mother's voice in his head. She had always been supportive, but now she would be disappointed in him. The fame he had chased so desperately, the viral success he had thought would be his ticket to greatness, now seemed like a hollow prize. Inside the security van, the cold metal cuffs around his wrists served as a harsh reminder of how quickly everything had unraveled. He stared out of the small window, the world outside seeming distant and alien. The officers didn't speak to him as they drove, their silence heavy with unspoken judgment. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, and he couldn't help but wonder what his life would look like after this moment. He had thought that viral fame was the ultimate achievement, but now, with his career in ruins, he questioned if it had all been worth it. His phone buzzed again, but this time he didn't dare check it. He knew it would be more bad news, more reminders of the disaster he had caused. Days passed in a blur for Jack. The excitement and adrenaline of pulling off pranks had faded, replaced by the harsh reality of his actions and their consequences. His phone buzzed incessantly, but Jack had learned to ignore it. Each notification was a reminder of how quickly his world had crumbled. What was once filled with likes, comments, and supportive messages from his followers had now become a flood of anger, disappointment, and ridicule. The comment sections were filled with harsh words. "What were you thinking?" "Unfollowed." "You've really messed up this time." Each message cut deeper than the last, leaving Jack feeling more isolated with every passing hour. As he sat in his hotel room, the weight of his decisions pressed down on him. His followers, who had once cheered him on, had turned their backs. His sponsors, who had believed in him, had dropped him without a second thought. Even his closest friends, those who had been with him from the start, were silent, their names now absent from his social media. The empty space felt louder than any words. It was clear. The viral fame Jack had so desperately sought had led him to a precipice, and now he was falling. In the midst of this, Jack received a message that stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't from a follower, a sponsor, or the media. It was from the Royal Guard himself. The words were simple, but they held a weight that no amount of social media validation could have ever provided. Apology accepted. Everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is learning from them. That message, despite its simplicity, felt like a lifeline in the suffocating sea of failure Jack was drowning in. For the first time since the incident, he felt a flicker of hope. The Guard, a symbol of unwavering discipline and stoicism, had shown Jack something crucial: humility. It wasn't about winning back his followers or regaining his brand deals. It wasn't about the viral success that had once consumed him. It was about understanding his mistake, taking responsibility, and moving forward. Still, the road to redemption wasn't going to be easy. Jack knew he couldn't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. But as he sat there staring at the screen, he realized that this moment could be the turning point. If the royal guard could forgive him, perhaps he could forgive himself. And maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild. Not just his reputation, but his own integrity. With a deep breath, Jack began to plan his next steps. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He had to make things right. For himself, for his followers, and for the royal guard. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's story. What did you think about Jack's journey? Do you think he deserved the harsh consequences? Or do you feel that his prank was just a misunderstanding? Let us know your opinions in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where something you thought was harmless turned into a big problem? Share your personal stories with us. We want to know how you would have handled Jack's situation. Your feedback means so much to us and helps us shape better content for you. So, whether you agree with Jack's choices or not, don't hesitate to express your thoughts. Did you see his actions as a lesson in responsibility? Or was it simply an innocent mistake gone too far? Also, if you have any suggestions for what Jack could do next, feel free to share. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. We've got more exciting content coming your way, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Let's keep the conversation going. We appreciate your support and can't wait to read your comments.